Hello everyone, my name is Hardeep and you are on the Kubernetes show. We are working on CKA exam curriculum. I redesigned this page. If you get into github.com and look for the Kubernetes show, search for the CKA and you'll get into this page. I did record some videos with the older curriculum because I felt like that was a prerequisite and that was needed to ensure you have good understanding of basics of Kubernetes. Uh, I have not kind of re-recorded everything, but there are some sections that I aligned. So all these videos that are here or the links documentation, it is still relevant. You should still refer this before you get into this section. All right, this one is aligned with the 1.33 version as of August 2025. And today we'll be working on this video 7, which is troubleshooting service and networking. With that, I'll get started. Right, so you need to have a working Kubernetes cluster. If you don't, look into previous videos that I have kind of provided here, uh, or I would say go into the Kubernetes. Like here, I'm clicking right, and it talks about how to set up 3 node cluster, and you should follow the steps from there. Coming back to the topic, today we are looking at troubleshooting services. It is about 30% of your exam. It is a subset. Basically, there are more topics in it. When I say subset, if you go back to the page, it talks about you need to know how to troubleshoot cluster node, troubleshoot cluster component, monitoring, managing, and all that, right? But there is one part is on networking and services. With that, I'll get started. So, what are the main problems that people face? One problem they might face or they might end up creating for themselves is, their container is running on a different port, or their pod is running on a different port, and the service configuration is defining another port, right? So let's create a pod, get PO, and we have a pod running. And if we look at the labels, it is labeled as app nginx. And if we do hyphen o wide, it is running on our worker node 2. So I have kget no, I have 3 nodes. We deployed the pod. If we do describe, and describe also gives similar things, similar details. It is running on this node, it has this label. And interestingly, here the command we ran, we said port 80, right? That's where it is listening. And if you see the example that I have given here, right? So this is a the way you do during the exam. You, to avoid all these problems, you can do, kubectl, expose pods nginx, and then there are options, right? For example, there is a option for target port and all that. So this is one way of doing it. So let's say target port is equal to 80, hyphen hyphen dry run is equal to client hyphen o YAML, right? So this is the right way of doing it. Take the output, put it in a file, modify, and then kind of use it, right? That's a kind of declarative way of doing it. But what I'm trying to show in this case is people make mistakes. They don't understand what this port and what this target port means. So the port that you see here, this is your service where it is listening, and the target port where your pod is listening. Pod is listening on 8080, sorry, 80, not 8080, because when we created the pod, we said pod 80, right? Port 80. Now let's follow this. What happens? Let's see the results, right? So we bring as it is, copy paste, and do k apply hyphen f my service. Now k get svc, you can see here is my new service running because that's the name. We named it as my service port. And this is the service. This is cluster IP. It doesn't show much details, but it shows where it is listening, right? Now we want to see more details of it. So you do describe. So if you do describe, there are few interesting things that you should look at. One is selector. We'll talk about this one in a few minutes. Second is port, and it says unset and it shows something, right? Then there are endpoints. Now this is what you should think about, or even the target port. Target port and endpoint is interesting. This is what is wrong with our deployment of the service, right? So another way to look at is using get endpoint slices. There used to be a command called endpoints. As you can see, it is getting deprecated in 1.33 plus. So 1.34 endpoints will no longer work. You use endpoint slices command. Output of this command, it shows your service with a kind of random name, and then it tells you what port it is kind of pointing on within, like, the what is the target port. Target port means where your container is listening, and then this is the IP of your container. So how do I know? K get po and hyphen o wide, and you can see this is the endpoint, right? So this is the endpoint, this is the endpoint port as per our definition, but that's not where service is listening, right? So let's check what happened, what caused, or what is the result of it if we make this kind of mistake. So I am creating a test named container with nginx image, getting inside that container with exec, running curl, trying to get head only. I don't want to spend time waiting and want to give it only 2 microseconds or milliseconds, and then connecting to my service on port 8081, right? The result, it says fail to connect to port 8081 after 1 millisecond, and I said 2, it failed even after 1, right? What's the problem? Problem is the target port, right? So that thing you need to keep in mind, that your container target port should match. So if I show the next command, because I'm running ZSH, it doesn't like the way I'm doing it. I can do a quote here and a quote at the end, right? So all this, put it in quotes and it will work in ZSH too. But anyways, running the command, and you see the results. It says container, it is using nginx, and it says container port 80. What it is doing, we are getting the container name of the name of the container within the pod, very first container, similarly image of first container, and the spec for ports, right? That's how it tells me it is listening on port 80. All right, let's fix it, right? So to fix it, I mentioned you go and modify this file, right? Correct it and then you reapply, right? So this is where your application is listening. This is where, this is where your service is listening, and this one is where your pod is listening, right? So K apply hyphen F my service, K get svc, and you can see it still shows this. But if we do k get endpoints, it shows 80, and if we do endpoint slices, it shows port 80 correctly and where it need to send traffic. Now let's see if it fixed our problem, right? Run the command again, and you can see http 200, right? Very simple, very easy to ignore, and it could result in a lot of wasted time during the exam, right? They might give you a configuration and say apply this and figure out what's wrong. So this is one thing you should look at, right? That was one thing. I've added some references to Kubernetes documentation. If you click on it, it'll open page something like this. This one, I think it goes to the documentation page only, service documentation. You can read more about it. But next one I want to show you is how do labels play role in all this, right? So when I ran with the show labels, you can see it says app nginx. If I describe, and in describe also it will show labels, right? App is equal to nginx. That's the label I am applying. uh, so we are doing app nginx hyphen bad, right? Okay, k apply hyphen f my service. Now what happened? K get svc, it still shows the same way, output looks same. K get endpoints, there is nothing, right? It says none. Endpoint slices, unset unset. Why so? Because service works based on the labels. Here selector, it need to match with your application labels. So we do k get po hyphen hyphen show labels. It says our label is app nginx, right? That is why it is not working, and fix would be going and removing this bad that I wrote, right? Now we are kind of matching the label. We do k apply hyphen f my service, and if we run this command again, we should not see this unset unset. We should see 80 and the IP of the pod, right? All right, now we looked at endpoints. Now here, same thing, showing the do not exist. You can kind of follow it and you'll see the same thing I shown with the hyphen bad. You can kind of copy paste it and use it as it is, right? It'll show you unset for endpoints. We are fixing it, and then you are doing kubectl apply and all that, right? Next is kind of pod connectivity, but before I get into it, let me get into the this debug services page on Kubernetes website, right? It tells you to run a kind of pod. For example, with busybox, it says don't restart, basically clean it up. If it dies, it dies, we don't care, right? Running a pod, it is removing also as soon as you are done with it, and then it is giving you a shell. You get out of shell, pod is gone, right? That's what it is doing. Now to debug a service, we looked at a couple of things. One thing we noticed was that your labels need to match, right? Another thing here, like you can also run commands like this with label. We are running selector, right? Here they're showing host name. We can literally copy paste this and run it in our environment. Let's do this, right? We did that and run. So k get po, if we see, it says, oh, it's crash back of k describe pod host name, and it says uh, back of restarting field container host name this. Okay, it pulled the image, but it is not working. Why? Because error terminated, and I think I know, because it might be pulling an image which is for x86, and my laptop is a MacBook M3. So yeah, it is ARM 64. That's why. That seems to be the problem, but it's all right. We can ignore this, but we can look at this itself, right? We are running one deployment. We are running it, uh, and we are setting some labels, host name, and then with host name we are kind of getting those pods, and then a for loop is run to get the IP for all of the pods, right? Kind of for loop, right? You're running go template, it is doing the same thing. Then Here you are getting each endpoint basically. Yes, right here it is kind of for loop, and you are doing wget, and you are not writing it anywhere else but on the screen itself. You are doing query, and then it outputs the host names, right? It might not work in some cases, right? First, does host name service exist, right? So k get svc. So you might run into a problem where you are trying to kind of run a query. For example, here we were doing, here query is going to endpoint and a port number of that endpoint, right? That's how you are getting the output. But if you want to do this way, you will not be able to get, because host name service doesn't exist. We just ran command, we don't see it, right? So how do you check for service like this, right? Then you can expose the port here, and then kind of this is how it sorts out, right? That's one way of doing it. You are defining what port your container listens on, and sorry, what port your service listen on, what target port inside your container. Another problem you might face is problem related to DNS lookup, right? So hold on, k get po k delete hyphen f. Let me clean up delete deployment and host names. I want to keep it clean. K get po k execit test, and let's run bash inside it. We are inside container, and container gets host name information from your cluster, right? And it is sending to a name server, and it is also defining search domain. If we do call this and try this, it won't work because service is listening on 8081, and you get the output, right? K get po, this is the part I was talking about when I said nginx, right? So yeah, now we know how kind of service name gets resolved, because there is a result.conf, and then you have search domains defined here, right? This helps with the name resolution. But if you want to kind of debug it further, I would say debugging name resolution, there are utilities like dnsutil. So I have provided links for all these. Use this utility, deploy it. Once you deploy, you'll be able to run commands like nslookup. If I try to run nslookup here, it says command not found, right? Unless I go install it, apt install dns utils, right? First I need to do apt update, then install, then kind of use it. It is possible, but I don't want to kind of add too many things into this container. But if you are kind of trying to troubleshoot, this is a handy tool available. You can use this, right? We are again looking at result.conf. Inside that, we are kind of trying to do nslookup and getting some response from your container. Make sure if your pod is running, right? For example, here it says check your pod in your kube system namespace. Both of them are running here in my case. So you can also do logs hyphen cube system logs pod code dns. You can do it this way, then you'll be doing it for per container, right? So I'm doing it per container. Another option, kube system logs, you do uh, deployment, then find the code dns hyphen hyphen all containers hyphen hyphen prefix is equal to true, and then you can do hyphen f. Right now it is kind of continuously monitoring. It is showing you logs from all your containers, right? This is one way of doing it. You can do all containers. If there are more than one container, more pods, this is how kind of you can see the logs, right? Then check if you have service, do you even have a service, right? kubedns is a service. Yes, it is there and it is listening on these ports, right? And are the endpoints exposed? I don't think this need to be checked in our lab setup, but in your exam you might have to validate. They might not even ask you to do kind of DNS level troubleshooting, which is kind of more real world uh, kind of work. But again, you need to know where to go and where to look for uh, the configurations, right? From where this configuration is coming, it is coming from Cube system, and inside that there is a config map that is for core DNS, and that defines how your DNS resolution works. All right, I'm coming back to the topic. Then we looked at the endpoint slices. Then next is pod to pod connectivity problems. So pod to pod connectivity, the way it works is you are sending traffic from one pod to another. Those pod might be working on same node, might be on another node. In If they are on same node, your connection is going through a tap, and that tap is kind of it's a pod is running in its own namespace is connected with a kind of tap resource and or with pair, uh, and depends on the CNI deployment, right? That connects it with the bridge, and that's how kind of you get out from one container and then get routed to another with the help of a kube proxy, right? Now let's try to connect, right? So what it shows here is you are running a container on port 80, and then you created another pod with the busybox image. You got in busybox and trying to run wget is same as curl, but see the problem. You are trying to connect to nginx on port 8080, but it is running on port 80, right? That's the problem. Let's try to kind of modify this and see if we can pod connectivity test.yaml, let's say, and let's try running both of these containers on different nodes. Node name, I think I have get no. Let's see, one will go on worker 1, and let's send the other one on worker 2. Okay, cube worker 1, and this pod, let's send it on cube worker 2. Okay, k apply -f. Okay, doesn't like it. K explain pod.spec dot node name. Node name, it needs a string only. And what is the problem? It says pod is missing. Oh, I might already have a pod running. K lead pod nginx, and that seems to be the problem. Yes. All right. We have two pods now. Kget po hyphen n. I know there are three. Kget po. One was test pod hyphen show labels hyphen wide. So we got one busy box, and it is on 2. Another one is on worker node 1, and let's get into it. Kexec hyphen it, and we want to get on this pod, which is let's get on busybox. Actually, busybox hyphen let's say bash if it has a shell. Okay, good. We have sh, right? So inside that, here we are trying to go to nginx on port 8080, right? It seems like it is picking something from outside, but let's simulate it using this, right? So from 2, we are inside BusyBox. We are going to node 1 on the pod IP. And if I go back to example that I was talking about, right, you might end up making a mistake similar, right? 8080. So nginx is not listening on 8080. So how would you fix it? You do 80, right? And that's the result. You are able to do wget, right? So very easy to kind of look over or overlook this, but that is one example. And similarly, uh, we had a service. I don't know if that service will still be in good shape, because if I say this, k get po and hyphen show labels app nginx, it still exists. K describe service svc my service and app nginx. So it'll work if I get inside the pod again. So it is running on 2, and we are going for node 1, which is behind the uh, service, right? So first, let me try running it for the pod, and we know it works. We just ran here. And second, I want to try it for my service, right? And we know it is listening on port 8081, right? So if I do this, you can see I'm getting the result, right? Uh, there might be a mistake going back to the same point, right? So ensure you are using the right port. That's the kind of gist of it, right? DNS resolution, I already talked about. You might be trying to resolve a endpoint, and that endpoint doesn't exist. It will not be able to resolve, right? Then you can use those DNS utils that I was showing you. Go on this link, you'll be able to find, right? Another problem could be you could have network policies, and those network policies could be kind of denying all the traffic, right? So how do we see that? K get net pol, and if there are any network policies, you will see with -a we are doing it across all the namespaces, right? Then we can try this. Let's try echo. I'm going to paste it, and then say k apply -f, right? Now if I do k get netpol, I see a 1, right? So k describe networking policies or netpol, netpol, and default deny all, right? It says allowing specific traffic to all pods. Basically it is not allowing to anything. It says none. This empty thing, basically the empty brackets, that is kind of blocking everything, and it is blocking for ingress only, not egress, right? You can kind of try to test it. I've given nginx here, but you can get the pod ip and then test it for that. K get svc. If you recall, we were able to get inside busybox and connect to this service on port 8081. Let's see. Oops, it's not working anymore, right? So k delete network policy, deny all, try it again, and you have access. So another thing to keep in mind, check for network policies. You can go and you can kind of allow, I deleted it, but there are ways to fix it. This is one way. Then external connectivity, you are using a service entry. Again, you are saying port 80 and then node port. So when we create services has types. So let's see, k get svc, and let's do my service port and -o YAML. And you can see here in this one, it will show type as cluster IP, right? And here we are using node port. Node port is an IP or a port on that particular node. You can have a load balancer, you can have a cluster IP. Cluster IP is internal only. Then there is another one which is node port. Node port is a specific range only, and it is basically making that pod, that service available on that particular port, right? Let's test it out. How does it work, right? So let's do echo and paste it as it is. A apply hyphen, right? So what we are doing, we defined a service named nginx node port. It is looking for app selector, app nginx. We know we have a pod with this port. It is container port is service port is 80. Target port is kind of inside the container, or where it is kind of pointing to. And then this is the node port. This port is on your VM and it is available, right? So how do I get nodes and hyphen o wide, and let's see if I can find it. So curl this and port goes like this. This is inside. Yes, I'm not able to even reach this network. That's the problem, right? So if I try this, I'm not able to reach this because this is running inside my multi pass environment, right? So but to test, what I can do is multi-pass shell. Let's get into master. We'll do it from master, then we'll go into a worker node 2, right? So if we run it like this, you can see I'm able to get the response. What if I delete it, right? So qctl delete, we deleted. I get inside master again, try running it, nothing, right? It doesn't work. So it is definitely creating something that I am able to kind of access it from the outside world. Go inside, you are able to access. And similarly, k get nodes. Let's get a shell in this node and try running the same command that I was running, and you should see the results, right? That's what node port does. It exposes a port on your node, IP, rather than pod itself. It is kind of making it public. It is something similar to load balancer. It is a bit more difficult to manage because you don't want your websites to have kind of random port numbers listed, right? For example, imagine going to google.com and colon, you need to specify a number. That's odd. It doesn't get used too much, but it's a available service for your testing. Anyways, make sure you use the right port. That was the idea. Then you want to learn more about different service types. I think I covered it in another video, but cluster IP is within the cluster itself, and you can expose your services to public using ingress gateway, right? There are ingress gateways, or ingress or a gateway. You can use those and expose. This node port exposes the service on each node with the static IP of the node, right? Static port number. Again, and doesn't get used in production. Cluster IP within the cluster itself, node port, making your port available outside of your cluster using the node IP address. This might not work because if you have for example, security groups or IP tables which you are running somewhere outside of your cluster to control access, you'll have to go and allow this port, then only things will work. For example, running on AWS, you'll have to enable it in your security groups, right? Allow access to that port in security groups, then people will from outside will be able to connect. Then there is load balancer. You can install load balancer plugins in your local environments. If you run Minikube, you can kind of deploy load balancer there. Very easy to do, but that is another way. But if you are in production, you are running on AWS, for example, you when you are defining your service, you will not be using the service types that we were seeing here, right? Node port. You'll be using load balancer, and it will automatically go and provision a actual load balancer for you. External name is a service that maps to a service that connects to an external field, right? So external name field. For example, a host name, api.foo.bar example, right? Again, it is during the exam, you will likely work on these two, not on these two, right? That is what I have noticed. But again, things have changed a little bit since the last exam. I've given some homework for you, where you can go and test things out. And key takeaways from this would be, when you connect to a service, whenever you want to reach to a IP address or a name, you generally go to a service provides a stable endpoint or stable name that doesn't change. Pods have a shorter life. Pods keep getting rotated. They get terminated. Your deployments get updated. Pods always come and go. They keep disappearing. You cannot point your applications directly to pods. You need a service. Service looks at endpoint or endpoint slices. It is nothing. It is looking at selectors. Inside selectors, there are labels that you specify. For example, I was showing here an example of selector, right? App is equal to does not exist, right? It won't work because this thing does not exist. It's a wrong label. So your selector need to be correct, right? That is another thing you need to kind of remember. So selector, and then based on that, your traffic goes to the pods, right? You can use describe, you can use kubectl get, kubectl endpoint slices, kubectl endpoints till at least version 1.33. Understand how core DNS works. This is kind of listed here in examples. We are kind of scaling it down to 0, and then you'll see your services will not be able to resolve and things will fail. You'll have to kind of scale it up again to kind of make it work. But again, this is your homework. You should go and play with it, right? Deny policy we talked about and we deployed. Then external, it won't be needed, but still, if you want to kind of allow external access, you need to think about enabling firewall rules and cloud-based load balancers. I've added some references here for you to read more on these topics. I hope this was helpful. With that, I'll close. We'll see you next week with another video. Good luck. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to post it on my YouTube channel or on my LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to help. Thank you.